learning Kuntres Essay 8, and we're at the part that the Alter Rebbe starts describing what it means to daven. Because until now he's told us that one shouldn't rush the chazan, and if one does, he chastises the people. But what is davening? How should a Jew daven? How should a Yid daven? And that's what he gets to right now. This would be it's the bottom of page 387 in Lessons in Tanya. This idea of davening is an obligation for all who understand the efficacy, even if one just has a little profound understanding of meditation. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know the details of meditation, to understand that meditation is important when you daven, to reflect. And he adds a very important line, Hillel, Kol chad lefum shiur delay. Everyone according to their means. You can't say, listen, meditation means like my friend Yankel, my friend Yitzchak, my friend Yerachmiel. It's not the way it works. The hisbonenus is lefi shiura delay. It's lefi shiura shalanu. It's lefi our own measurement. So in other words, and I've seen this and experienced it, there are people that can reflect and meditate. We're talking about real reflection without interruption of other things coming into the mind. Because once that happens, you've broken the meditation and the reflection. See, I want to back up for a second. I don't know if we ever spoke about it. I think we did, but it's good to repeat it. When we talk about meditation in Chabad Hasidus, and I would say there are some similar ideas in other forms of meditation that are mentioned in other Hasidic groups. One thing's for sure, that if in the middle of your meditation you think about what's for supper and how much money you have in the bank to cover and when do you have to take your kids to school, that's not meditation. You're out of meditation. You might have been in meditation, and now you're outside. Now, can you go back? Sure. But the problem is that for meditation and davening to be effective, to really stimulate your davening, which then stimulates your heart, which then stimulates your behavior, you need to be there. And if all of a sudden you're not there, then you're not there. No problem. Doesn't mean you're a bad guy. It just means you're not in the mode of Chabad meditation, Jewish meditation, kosher meditation, Ari Kaplan meditation, whatever. So, and this is not simple. This is not simple. And that's why I think I told you when I was 17, 18 years old, a young bacher in yeshiva, and our mashpia fabrained one night. I'll never forget this because he left such an impression on me. And he was saying, do not meditate, do not think Hasidus. In Chabad it's called thinking Hasidus. Don't think Hasidus before you start Haidu more than 5 minutes. And and I was a bacher, and I was, a top bacher, and I was into this, and I was at the top of the game, and why 5 minutes? I want to think half an hour. Why is the mashpia putting a cap on my thinking of Hasidus before davening? I remember I was asking myself. And he repeated it during the Fabrenga numerous times. So I went over to an older bacher. An older bacher, because we always had in the yeshiva older bacherim who were kind of learning themselves, but also guides for us younger bacherim. So he said to me, I'd like you to think a minute or two or whatever, he said, without an interruption outside of that meditation, then come back and talk to me. Because it requires training that the mind, the focus, what we call in Hebrew, rikuz hamachshava. Rikuz hamachshava. Focus, merakiz, lirkoz, to focus and concentrate of your thought on that thought that you're thinking about. Then the question is, what are you thinking about? Even someone who is thinking, what is he thinking? I mean, Pirush Hamilos is not meditation. The meaning, knowing the meaning of the words that you say in davening is not meditation. That's Pirush Hamilos. Like in English, you say a sentence and you don't know what you're saying. You're mixed up. Know what you're saying. So therefore, there's a before, there's a after, there's a during, there's a future, a present, and past. So Pirush Hamilos is simple text. I mean, simple text really begins with the pronunciation correctly of the words. Number two, once you pronounce correctly the words, you learn to know their meaning. That's number two, Pirush Hamilos. Number three is where the Chabad meditation, thinking Chassidus kicks in, which is now take a thought in Chassidus that you've learned, and you've mastered, and you understand, and now think about it. So the suggestions are to take a line or two of Tanya, or from a mimer, and to think it, not to speak it, to think it, and not allow anything to enter your mind during that thought. Now you tell me how easy or difficult that is. And when you master that, then you add another minute. And so this is the training that we got in yeshiva when we were, teenagers, to think Hasidus. So when we say meditation, and that Alter Rebbe is always talking about his bonus, right? What's one of the primary cardinal differences between Chabad Hasidus and Breslov Hasidus is his bonus versus his boidedus. His boidedus is a key element in Breslov teaching, which is being alone. His boided, right? In Chabad, we don't find that teaching. In Chabad, we find an emphasis on his boinenus, meditation, reflection. So in the Alter Rebbe, here, and in so many other places, Moshe and Tanya, speaks about his boinenus. He says, he says it's an obligation. Look at his words. It's not my words, his words. Choiva shel Torah mamish. It's a biblical obligation. Now, it doesn't mean 1 to 6:13. Not yet. You'll see soon. To use your mind and to utilize the benefit of his meditation and v'oimik hadas tzas. In other words, even if you're not a full meditator, you haven't mastered that, but you can begin training your mind to stay focused. And this idea, and then he says, Kol chad lefum shid uri delay. Why does he add those words? Because we're all different, and each of our minds works in a different way. And I've seen in my lifetime people that are able to be misbeinen and for a long time, and really come away with a deep understanding, a deep reflection on the issue they're meditating on. And then I've seen people that can't, but they have enough of the hisbonenus to stay focused, to concentrate better in their davening. Okay? So the Alter Rebbe can't tell you there's only one style for hisbonenus. It's not true. The general guidelines are kind of, in Chabad, one system, one approach, right? For example, in certain Hasidic groups, I think also primarily in Breslov, there's this concept of maybe repeating a word and things like that. We don't find that in Chabad. We don't see that in the language of the Tanya. in the 5 sections that we've learned. Okay? We don't find that. So that's a different style. It's a holy style. And that's, but it's not the Chabad meditation. What Aryeh Kaplan did, for those that read his books, which I would think some of you did, Jewish meditation. Kaplan, who lived, by the way, only a few blocks away, and who my mother, Allah Shalom, and his wife were friends. So Kaplan does an interesting thing in his book, Jewish Meditation. He combines Chabad and Breslov and maybe some of Rav Kook in his Jewish meditation. So, one can't say Kaplan is pure Chabad meditation. One can't say Kaplan is pure Breslov meditation. It's not. But he had such a vast knowledge. He was so bright. He was a genius that he in other words, he did not limit himself to one discipline. He took several disciplines and he combined it, which is fine. But I'm just saying that, so people have asked me over the years, is Kaplan's Jewish meditation Chabad meditation? I said it has kernels and ideas included in there, but it's not pure Chabad meditation, just as it's not pure Breslov meditation, because Breslov really doesn't focus on meditation as much as isolation, his Baidadus. Now, what Kaplan did is interesting, and this would be, I don't think this was ever studied. What Kaplan did was he kind of takes out of Rab Nachman's Svarim, and he injects in them Chabad meditation. In other words, in Breslov, for Rab Nachman, Rab Nosson, it doesn't seem that there's an emphasis on meditation, right? But Kaplan doesn't do that. He puts Chabad meditation into Breslov Torah, which is an interesting phenomenon. And again, I'm not Mr. Bucky in Breslov Chassidus, but Rabbi Chaim Kramer, there are several in Eretz Yisrael that are, I think, it would be interesting to see, how they look at what Kaplan did, and if they believe, that's staying authentic to Reb Nachman, Reb Nosson's approach, what he wants. I haven't studied it, so I don't know, but I have a hunch that it's not. In Chabad meditation, from what I've seen and heard from mashpiyim, older and younger, and I'm very impressed with these young mashpiyim. They come here to Borough Park tonight. We're having a fabrengen with a young guy from Nyack, New York. He's one of the mashpiyim there. I have no idea who he is. I know the family name. And I see that they're staying consistent to the Chabad system. They don't deviate away. In other words, they don't deviate away. I'm talking now intellectually, how they look at a mimer, how they look at Chassidus, and how they use it in their Avodas Hashem, and how they share it with people. I find that very commendable, because it's easy to deviate, not in a negative way, but it's a deviation. It's not pure Chabad thought, and I see that they're trying to keep to pure Chabad thought, which is very telling of these people. And I'm not saying everyone's this way, but the people that are immersed in this system, which is a feather in Chabad's cap, by the way, that the new generation, the new leaders, the new mashpiyim, the new teachers are getting the nekuda of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe. You understand? They're not creating. In other words, I don't see them doing what Kaplan did. You hear me? What Aryeh Kaplan did in Jewish meditation, they're not doing that. They're staying on the Chabad track, and only on the Chabad track. And again, their audience. One second, Moshe. Their audience is Chabad. We had here just for Gimel Tammuz, someone who came to Fabrein. He's a mashpia in Morristown. In Morristown. And again, he's much younger than I was listening to him and even, challenged him on a few things, and it was a nice, lively discussion at the Fabrengen, but he's on track. He's really on track. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I just want to ask Rabbi Dalfin. I know, in a way, I'm sure all of us are very familiar with it, but I'm curious if you can help to define a little bit just the difference, because sometimes it can be a very fine difference, a very fine line between hisbonenus and hisbodedus.
I don't know. To me, Moshe, I think it's a very not fine line. It's a very large line. It's very obvious. Hisbodedus means talk to God. To talk to Hashem and tell him what you need, what you are, what is. His bonus is you take let's say these lines in Tanya that we just read, and you start thinking about them, and you think about them. It's not about talking; it's about thought. It's completely different. That's number one. Number two, even if there is some form of thought, and not even the thought that's there in his boidedus is more of a kind of practical orientation. Simcha, emuna, betochen. Here it's about think about God. In other words, Chabad meditation, that's why most people don't do it, is in a way very ethereal, very mystical. It's like throw your mind into God. So the average person will say, what am I going to have from it? What are you wasting my time for? And I understand the argument, because I myself have questioned myself and questioned my teachers. What is the purpose? But only after you allow yourself to go through the process of focusing and thinking about a line or two in Tanya without saying, how is it relevant to me? See, that doesn't belong in a meditation, and that's a mistake people make. That either comes or doesn't come automatically. That's not part of the Chabad meditation. The Chabad meditation is, who is God? Who am I? How did God create the world? Why did he create the world? And to have the formula for those things and to think in it. So we have Yesh Miayin, creation ex nihilo. We have Ilo V'ol, cause and effect. What's the difference? Give me some examples. And this is what you're thinking about. Completely not in the Breslov handbook. Completely not. Not only not in the Breslov handbook, in any other Hasidic group, they have a very different approach. And that's fine. That's why this is Chabad and this is Breslov. It's two different systems. Now, so your question is coming from, I would say, from what you see and hear on the street and over the last 40 years. But, if you were to ask your son, I would think he would be able to identify and understand exactly what I'm talking about, because he sat in a Lubavitch yeshiva at the age of 19, 20, 21, 22, and I'm sure that he heard this, he learned it, and he whether he does meditation or not, he understands what we're talking about. So it's only when you are experiencing it, and you can, doesn't mean you could do it at 50, 60 without going to Lubavitch yeshiva, but there's a system, and so his boidedus is, I don't know. That's to me. What are you guys, Hillel, Isser? Do you have anything to say about this question that Moshe asked?
Question.
Yeah.
I'm pretty clear on the difference, but I have a question, which is that I've heard that you should learn Chassidus before you daven. Learning Chassidus before you daven sounds to me like it's not the same thing as hisbonenus.
Absolutely, hisbonenus. You're 100%. You're 100% right.
Now,
you're right.
So as you were speaking, so I was thinking, I read this very interesting sikha, and it's talking about Amalek and Bilam. If you write one on top of the other, and you divide left and half, right? And then what's the antidote is the Ahava and Yira of Torah, and you split them in half. You read.
That's a very interesting thought, but even that sounds like not what you were talking about is his bonus.
That's right. You're right on that too.
Okay.
You're 100% right. That's learning the Shmaka Inyan, a good thing to learn and to think about, but that's not his bonus. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God's the only one. You don't need more. You need to think now. What is Shema? Listen. Hear. Am I listening? How do I listen? With what am I listening? Now you start thinking about that. Now, not you make up your own ideas. What does Chassidus, what does Kabbalah, Chassidus say about Shema? Then you go to the next word, Yisrael. Yesh.
Okay, so one of the things I remember from Aryeh Kaplan's book is he was talking about Shemona Esrei and, spending a lot of time on each word of the first 3 paragraphs.
Yeah.
And when you're, right? And when you're saying Elokai Abraham, okay, Perush Hamilim is the God of Abraham. But there's a whole lot going on behind that of what that really means, Elokai Abraham versus Elokai Yitzchak versus, and what each of those represent in Hashem's midos in the world. And, if you could, is that more on the line of
it's more on the line, but that's first of all, thank you for that example. But that's an example of how Kaplan mixes together the streams of his bonus, right? Because what I'm hearing, the way you said it, and in the name of Kaplan, is more the Breslov orientation towards his bonus of Breslov. That's what I'm hearing. In Chabad, it's true what you just said. There's a difference between Elokei Avram and Elokei Yaakov, but that's not his bonus. That's in a sense more Peter Shamilas, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the same God. So what's the difference? Avram is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gvura, Yaakov is Rachamim. Right? Okay, Tiferes. Fine. That's not what I was saying before about Chabad's bonus. I'm saying is Elokei Avram means the God of Avram. Who is God? Before love and fear and attraction, and who is God? Do I know what God is? Do I want to know what God is? Let me try to understand what God is. So what you're doing is you're creeping up. Chabad's bonus is getting lost in the unknown. It's going up. Breslov, his bonus is going down. It's a different orientation. So, in other words, in Chabad, it's what we call Hafshotat Hagashmiyut, stripping of the material, of the physical. Your physical mind is encapsulated and limited by whatever it has. Now, get out of that. Undo it. Take off those garments. It's a very different process. It's getting lost in the unknown versus try to find out more of what's known. It's two different. Now, so I don't have to, in Chabad, you don't have to, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, to know the difference between the 3. That in Chabad is kind of more Pirush Hamilus. You just said something, and it says 3 times Elokei. It should say Elokei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. It doesn't say that. Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. What do you mean? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each have a different God? Come on. Oh, so I have to understand that, right? So that's an important, but that's more in the Chabad, from the Chabad perspective, that's called Pirush Hamilus. What are you saying? Know the meaning of what you're saying. Chabad goes a step before that. What is the Elokei? Who is the Elokei? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu. What's Shema? What's Yisrael? Hashem Elokeinu. Not enough. Hashem Echad. 6 different thoughts encapsulated in that one sentence. And So it's a different process, and there's no question that it's a much harder process. It's no question about it. But the Alter Rebbe's Shita, we're talking now, between ourselves. The Alter Rebbe's Shita, he wants a Yid, and he says a Yid can. This is the significant part, is the Alter Rebbe believes that we all can do this. We don't have to be a rabbi and a scholar and have gone to yeshiva. He says, if you just want, and he says we should want to make our davening animated, for it to be alive, and to make us move, and to animate us about and excited, and say we love you, God, like famous chassid each of the Masmid comes out of a brain, and he says, Ich hab dir lieb, Gott. I love you, God. Like, who's he talking to? I love you, God. Like, he had this Farbringen, he had this meditation, and he came to the realization, and he was a big chassid, a big Talmud Chacham, that he really loves God. So it's I don't know if this is similar, but it's like last Shabbos, I told you I was in Long Beach for a Shabbaton. So Erev Shabbos, they start Shabbos 7 o'clock early. So I called my wife, because she didn't go. She was with her mother, who was not doing great. Anyway, so she was there for Shabbos, her mother. So I called to wish her good Shabbos. And she says to me on the phone, we're saying Tehillim, V'hamevin Yovin. Now, Mavin Yovin, is Hebrew, which means basically, in that context, it means, it's almost all over. And this is the call, Erev Shabbos, before I go into a Shabbaton. So what should I do? I got a Shabbaton, so I, put the phone down, turned the phone over. I didn't want to see anything on Shabbos. Okay, and Baruch Hashem, I was able to not think about it on Shabbos. Shabbos, Simcha Shabbos is, and Motzei Shabbos, the moment Shabbos over, I tell the rabbi there, I was staying with him, I have to, I'm dealing with an emergency, blah, blah, blah. I was now dreading the moment I'm going to turn the phone on to see what's on the phone. I turned the phone on, and there's no news. And then I called my wife, and she says, yeah, the morning was very hard, but then she got better in the afternoon. And I mamish felt that moment, only for a moment, this elation and simcha coming out from death to life. Just in that one moment. Because I'm going into Shabbos with those words, saying Tillim, Hamevin Yovin, which implies death, dying. And Motzei Shabbos, there's no message. And then when I call her, she says, yes, this, it's like, wow, Baruch Hashem. So these are moment experience that can't be repeated. You can't put it in a box. You can't write a script. They happen when they happen, and then they go. And either you take it in, and it really does something to you, or not. Rabbi Lipsker from Bal Harbor, who passed away just a few months ago. In 1981, I think May of 81, he had a 46-minute Yechidus with the Rebbe. It was unheard of in those days. First of all, the Rebbe stopped Yechidus really in 1979, 1980. But the Rebbe wanted to speak to him. He was going through a rough time in Florida. So, 46 minutes? He was 36 years old at the time. He is a full-fledged Lubavitcher. He's not about the Shuvah. He's not a Gevir. He's not anyone that needs Kiruv. You know what I'm saying? There's someone that you gotta pat on the back so they still stay involved and all that. He's a Lubab from Russia. The family went through communism and Stalinism. They're made as hard as rock. You can't break them. Right? So he needs 46 minutes of the Rebbe's time? Obviously, the answer is yes. And I'm listening to these videos of how he talks about this is I think, within a month of his death. He talks about that experience, and because I know the background, so I'm listening, and it was like, yeah. In 1981, the Rebbe gave him a new life. But he was a vessel, and he accepted it. In other words, he didn't give up. He was emotionally in a very difficult state, and the Rebbe's words to him gave him such an uplifting that he took and he went with it, and he created what he created the next 40 to 50 years, which we have today, right? So, and he says it was like that Yechidus, and he said something phenomenal. On his settle, on his note, guess what he wrote? Oh, so one second. He comes, he waits online to go in, and Rabbi Groner is there. Rabbi Groner says to him, no long time with the Rebbe. No long time. So he says, okay. So Rabbi Groner says, let me see what you wrote. He didn't want to see exactly what he wrote, but let me see how many pages you're going to give the Rebbe to read. Because Groner suspected him of having 3, 4, 5, 6 pages, which in the past he wrote that because he was an activist and he did a lot of things, and a lot of things to share with the Rebbe. So he says, I don't want to show you. So of course Rabbi Groner gets more antsy, and he says, I'm not going to let you in. I'm not going to let you go into Yechidus. Now he knew Groner wasn't going to do that because he's scheduled to go in, and it came from the Rebbe. The Rebbe said he wanted to see Lipsker. Didn't come from Lipsker, so of course he's going to let him in. But Groner was playing hardball. So he says, I'll show it to you, because, Rabbi Lipsker says, you got to listen to it. It's online on this YouTube clip. Lipsker says, I'll show it to you, but from far away. I don't want you to see what I wrote. So he says, okay. So he stands back, he takes out his paper, and he shows, and then he tells on the video, he says, you know what was there? Just my name. Sholem Ber Ben Beilechana or something. On a piece of paper, everything's blank except his name. That's what he gave it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe spent 46 minutes with him. Because he says that he was at a point in his life where he didn't need to say anything. If, he knew that the Rebbe will say what he needs to say. And he says the Rebbe asked him 2 or 3 things during the 46 minutes, and the rest of the time the Rebbe was talking and he was listening. Then he explains, says how he was looking into the Rebbe's eyes, and the Rebbe's eyes looking at him, and he says it was like the sun shield was removed, and he just held his ground, looking into the eyes of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's talking to him, and did not flinch and go like that. It's very intense. I mean, I know about that because I had it with the Amshon of a Rebbe in Bayit Vegan. When he gives you that bracha and he looks into your eyes, you feel like, I'm going to drop dead right here. It's like you're face to face, and he's intense. He's not smiling. So these moments, and so his bonanus, why am I saying it? His bonanus is coming to such a place in your soul where there is that intense, piercing look of you into God and God into you. And that takes avodah. That takes time. It doesn't happen one day. It could take years. But if you train yourself in this method, after years, something will rub off. Something will stay. Okay, this is a good conversation, Baruch Hashem. I know we went over, but it's an important one. We never really got into it. So hopefully, Moshe, you will also find that this is a difference between Breslov and Chabad. And I even should say Breslov. There's no other Hasidic group that does this type of isbonenus. And by the way, they disagree with it. That was one of the... what was Rabbi Ron Kalisker, who fought with the Alter Rebbe, who disagreed with the Lechevich, in time the Alter Rebbe, besides that Tanya, they didn't feel should be publicized to everyone. But this idea of isbonenus, they said it's not for the average person. And the Alter Rebbe said it is for the average person. The Alter Rebbe said a person has a mind, and a person has a soul, And a person can, if he wants, to come to the greatest dveikus with Hashem through this way. They said, dveikus? Emulate the Rebbe. Know some of the Hasidic groups know the names of God associated with each bracha. Right? So I told you my friend the Breslov in Tzvas, when he makes Kiddush, it takes him a long time to make Kiddush because he's thinking about the Shem Hashem as it is in the Kiddush. Then when he makes another bracha, he says it slowly, he's thinking the Shem Hashem on the Shahakol. Because the Nekudas are different, that's all Kabbalah. And that's another system, but that's not the system we're talking about. I tried my best to explain it. I hope I succeeded a little bit. Yes, Yaini, what do you say?
I have to tell you, Rabbi, it's very interesting because this Shabbos, for a couple of days, we were up north. We went to Meron, and for sure, I was in Meron, and we were in Tzvas. So in Tzvas, I daven all different shuls, like for Mincha, for Ma'ariv, all different shuls, just to get a feel.
Right.
And there's a very different approach. And it's all Hasidim up there. Very, very, very hard to find a litbak up there, especially now.
Right.
And every single davening, there's one shul there's screaming, there's another one there's no screaming, one's quiet, all different kinds of different approaches. And I found there was one shul called the Chernobyl shul. So I davened one Tfilas Mincha in the Chernobyl shul, and it was so quiet that you wouldn't believe. You could hear a pin drop the whole davening, like quiet, like you wouldn't believe. And then you go to the Breslov shul, and it's it's rowdy and everything. And then there was another shul that I couldn't believe. It's called Vizhnitz Tunis. Vizhnitz Tunis. I'm like, what? There's Vizhnitz Hasidim from Tunis, from Tunisia. It's like the weirdest thing. But anyway, it was very cool.
Okay, see everyone tomorrow. Sei gesund. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Take care. Hatzlacha.